The fact that no police came to find him or his black car to question him about these incidents can only have served to confirm and strengthen in the defendant's mind a dangerous belief in his invincibility, in his power sexually to dominate and abuse women without being stopped.
The abuse of power of one man and one institution has left women across the country asking how it happened. Not least, the women Wayne Couzens directly targeted.
All have spoken of their sense of freedom and security taken from them, of feeling vulnerable and fearful for themselves and others going about their ordinary lives.
One woman wept in court, talking about feeling survivor's guilt. I couldn't help but feel relieved, she said, that she didn't have to face the terror that Sarah Everard did. And another acknowledged the importance of accountability. We could have saved Sarah, she said, if action had been taken when the crime was reported. Today, Wayne Couzens was sentenced to 19 months in prison for exposing himself on 3 occasions. On the 13th of November 2020, Couzens stood completely naked and masturbated as a female cyclist passed by on Ringwald Road near Dover. She reported it to the police, but was unable to give number plate details of the car she saw nearby, and the investigation stalled. Later, traffic cameras and mobile phone data placed him in the area of the incident. Then, in the early months of the following year, Couzens offended again. This is his car at a McDonald's drive-through in Swanley in Kent. He exposed his genitals to female staff. They were left feeling shaken, upset and angry. This is his car again 2 weeks later. This time, staff took the registration details and identified the make and model of his car on CCTV. He'd even paid for his items with a credit card in his own name. The incidents were reported to the police, but they weren't followed up in time. Within a week, he'd kidnapped Sarah Everard near Clapham Common in South London. He raped and murdered her. Yet another apology from the Metropolitan Police Service today. The Deputy Assistant Commissioner says that he recognises the hurt and trauma that Wayne Couzens caused the women that he targeted through his indecent exposures. And that phrase raises questions about the broad field of inquiry that is language and semantics. Are these crimes treated seriously enough?
We call it flashing. You know, we all laugh or giggle when we say that word, flashing. But indecent exposure is, one, it's an offence that's an act of aggression. And two, it's indicative or predictive of more serious offending potentially further down the line.
Today, the police watchdog publicly confirmed that Couzens had been part of a WhatsApp group in which he made racist comments and joked about rape and domestic abuse. The Deputy Assistant Commissioner says he wishes Wayne Couzens had been arrested before he went on to murder. "I'm sorry that he wasn't," he said. "The fact he did this whilst serving as a police officer has brought shame on us all."
Ria Chatterjee reporting there. Well, our North of England correspondent Claire Fallon has done a significant amount of work looking into the crime of indecent exposure and how the police and criminal justice system responds to it. And she joins me in the studio now. Claire.
I'm going to start with the words of one of the women in court today who phoned police to say that a man had exposed himself to her, a man who we now know is Wayne Couzens. Of course, that was not known at the time. The police did not know it was a serving officer who had done this. She said that she vividly remembers being concerned that someone who could expose themselves to a stranger in such an intimidating way could go on to commit much more serious acts. She said, "I didn't feel when I reported the crime it was taken as seriously as it should have been." And I say those words because I think they will resonate with a lot of people. Certainly familiar to me from when I reported indecent exposure in 2020, and having spoken to many women since then, who've also experienced this crime and who've then attempted to report it to police. Many say exactly the same thing, that it's about a police attitude, but also a wider societal attitude to this kind of crime. We picture a comedy, old, harmless men in flasher max. That just is not the reality of the crime in many cases. And so when police today have apologised for these missed opportunities to deal with this offending, I think in reality, these are opportunities that are being missed a lot of the time when people are reporting this kind of crime. And a couple of years ago now, in 2021, we obtained figures from most police forces on the way that they were responding to reports of indecent exposure. And in reality, the vast majority of those cases weren't getting to court. And not only that, the cases were being closed without anyone actually being prosecuted. That was certainly what was happening most of the time in any case. And so with the sentencing today of Wayne Couzens, I think we do see a much bigger problem, as many would see it, going on within the justice system.
As you say, Couzens was sentenced today, a sentence not typical at all for this type of crime.
Very unusual to be getting to court after an indecent exposure offence, even more unusual to be getting a custodial sentence. Let me give you the details of one case that I've been looking at in just the last couple of weeks. This was a man who exposed himself to a number of school children. He wasn't jailed, he was fined. The comments of the judge, also some people I think may take issue with, saying, "I'm sure you're a thoroughly decent, hard-working man. You're being ridiculously stupid in drink." As I say, many people will think the attitudes of society are also a problem here.
Claire Fallon, thanks very much. Well, joining me now is Harriet Wistrich, a lawyer and the director of the Centre for Women's Justice. Harriet Wistrich, I'm assuming none of this surprises you.
Well, from what we've heard over the last couple of years, no, unfortunately it doesn't. A lot of this has come out. It is still really shocking when you think about a serving police officer who goes around deliberately exposing himself and not being stopped in relation to that. And the fact that we have officers in the police who've been able to do that, and nothing's been done. It doesn't surprise us because this is what we've seen, police failing to investigate these cases and the level of police perpetrated abuse that we've seen in recent years. One can only hope that things are going to radically transform, and that any officer who has ever been reported for such a crime is immediately subject to criminal investigation and misconduct if they haven't been already.
I'll come on to the police specifically in a moment, but Claire makes a very good point, doesn't she, that, you know, this is it as much a wider society issue, that idea that somehow flashing is deemed to be, you know, something from an old sitcom in 1950s or something, that we as a society don't take it seriously enough?
Yeah, well, I remember actually, I think it was only made illegal in 2003 when there was a review of the Sexual Offences Act. In fact, I know somebody who was involved in who's from Leeds, who was involved in the discussions around saying we need to make this actually a crime rather than a nuisance act. But I suspect most women watching this programme will, at some point, as I have, and I'm sure most of us have at some stage, been subjected to this and have been made to laugh about it as though it's something funny. Clearly, it can be extremely menacing and very traumatizing. And I really feel for the women who, you know, were the victims of Couzens, knowing that, you know, the police failed to investigate their reported crimes and the outcome that eventually happened, which could have been prevented had this been taken seriously.
I mean, when we look at the specific failures by the police, you know, Wayne Couzens was a serving officer, David Carrick, a serial rapist and a serving officer. In your experience, are the failures by the police, officers turning a blind eye, not wanting to dob in one of their own, or is it part and parcel of a cultural problem?
Well, I mean, what we've seen is that there has been a complete failure. I mean, it's not simply not wanting to dob in. There has been complicity. As we also heard today, there were members of the WhatsApp group, other serving police officers, who were joking about rape and abuse with Couzens, and there are also high levels of racism and homophobia as well. So clearly, this is something that has been emerging over the last couple of years since Couzens was arrested. The endemic level of misogyny within certain parts of policing, which is terrifying, even for those of us who've been working around this area for many years. That what has emerged is really, really shocking, and worse than even the most jaded of us who've been working around this, had anticipated, really.
I mean, the Met have apologised again today. It's clearly, evidence shows, not just a problem for the Met. I just wonder, how do you feel women who want and need to report being the victims of some sort of sexual assault would feel today, again, about going to the police?
Well, I mean, the knowledge that it was a police officer who was committing these offences could make you feel, very worried about reporting. I mean, I think I would encourage anyone to report these crimes, because it's only by reporting and those crimes being investigated and prosecuted that we begin to tackle the problem. But one can only hope that the dreadful shame that the Met Police and other police forces have had to confront about these failures will mean absolute major transformational change. And I'd encourage any woman, if she wants to report and is anxious about it, to speak to a support service or to get a friend to go with them. And if they are not investigated, if their report is not taken forward, to make a formal complaint about it, and just to keep pushing and making the police accountable, because they should be doing their job. And I know there are police officers there who want to do it, and we just have to really push for it.
Harriet Wistrich from the Centre for Women's Justice, thanks very much for talking to us this evening. Thank you.